Jericho Spence adjusted his tie-in act that felt laughably out of place on a spaceship filled with chefs who probably didn't even know what a tie was. He wiped his palms on his trousers and tried not to look too awestruck by the gleaming metallic halls of the culinary ship Palatinas. The invitation had been sealed with an insignia resembling a constellation and a chef's hat. Its contents had been simple yet impossible to ignore. The United Culinary Guild of the Galactic Concord cordially invites Earth's representatives to the 347th Galactic Culinary Showcase. Bring your finest spices. When the Global Food Federation back on Earth had put out a call for submissions, Jericho had only half-heartedly sent in a bottle of his Molten Core hot sauce, expecting nothing. He didn't even think anyone on the panel could handle its heat without signing a waiver. So when an AI hologram had arrived at his Albuquerque office to inform him he'd been selected, his first reaction had been disbelief. Why me, he'd asked, still holding a half-empty bottle of Inferno Ignite, one of his milder concoctions. The hologram's answer had been curt: you were Earth's only submission with noteworthy levels of heat. Congratulations, Jericho Spence of Firestarter Sauces. You are now Earth's culinary delegate. Now, standing in the observation deck of Palatinas, Jericho felt the full weight of his accidental responsibility. He wasn't a diplomat, a scientist, or even a proper chef. He was just a guy who liked making stuff so spicy it made grown adults cry. And now, he was about to represent Earth on the galactic stage. The observation deck opened into a hall that looked more like a rainbow had exploded. Alien chefs, towering food processors, and shimmering, gravity-defying cookware filled the space. The air was thick with scents Jericho couldn't begin to describe: floral and metallic, sweet and smoky, sharp and savory all at once. A gelatinous figure glided up to him, dripping faintly. It resembled a sentient sea anemone, its translucent surface refracting the light into a prism. Ah, the Earthling, it boomed. Its voice resonated like someone shouting into a barrel of water. I am Chef Raltran, head of the Culinary Guild. Welcome aboard the Palatinas. You are the best your planet has to offer. Jericho hesitated, holding up the polished case of sauces he'd brought with him. Well, I make hot sauce. That counts, right? Raltran rippled, his gelatinous face somehow conveying disdain. Primitive spice oils. How quaint. I look forward to watching you try. Before Jericho could come up with a snappy comeback, a holographic voice filled the hall. Attention, chefs. The Galactic Culinary Showcase begins in 1 hour. Prepare your dishes. Presentations will be judged on complexity, innovation, and the use of spices. Non-compliance will result in immediate disqualification. Raltran leaned closer, his towering form blotting out the colorful spectacle of the room. Do try not to embarrass yourself, Earthling. Jericho's assigned station was small compared to the elaborate setups around him, but it was packed with tools he didn't recognize. Hovering knives floated above a countertop that seemed to reshape itself to fit whatever ingredients he placed on it. A spherical device next to the station beeped softly, apparently waiting for instructions. Jericho set his case down and opened it. His humble offerings included Inferno Ignite, Dragon's Breath, and his piece de resistance, Molten Core. Each bottle gleamed like it contained liquid fire. His sauces had won local awards and inspired a few viral reaction videos, but here? They looked absurdly out of place among the exotic ingredients the other chefs were arranging: glowing fungi, translucent fruit, and a silvery liquid that one chef spooned into the air, where it floated like a cloud. Humans and their spices came a nasal voice from the next station. Jericho turned to see a Tevlian chef, a lanky, bug-eyed creature with 6 limbs, sneering at him. They boil leaves in water and call it flavor. Truly archaic, said a second voice. This one came from a gaseous being suspended in a containment sphere. Its voice vibrated like a tuning fork. I heard their capsaicin is so mild, it doesn't even register on a Tevlian's palate sensors. Jericho gritted his teeth, but said nothing. He wasn't here to pick fights. He was here to prove something. He pulled out a bottle of Molten Core, his magnum opus. Made with Carolina Reapers, scorpion peppers, and a proprietary mix of acids, it was so potent that it came with a disclaimer on Earth. Even humans called it unreasonably aggressive. "Let's see how these smug aliens handle this," he muttered, setting the bottle on the counter. The showcase began with a theatrical flourish. Each chef presented their dish to a panel of judges who floated above the main arena on a circular dais. The panel consisted of 3 judges: Calox, a crystalline being who resonated softly when it moved; Grethok, a 6-eyed reptilian whose tongue flicked nervously as he observed the proceedings; and Veska, a floating orb of light that pulsed rhythmically with every word it spoke. Raltran was up first, and his presentation was as dramatic as his personality. He unveiled a vibrational soup, its surface shimmering with harmonic waves that released bursts of flavor when consumed. The judges were enraptured, their reactions glowing literally in Veska's case. The Tevlian chef followed with a quantum tartare, which changed flavor profiles depending on the eater's mood. Then it was Jericho's turn. He stepped up to the platform with a tray of tortilla chips topped with tiny dollops of his sauces. The crowd murmured, amused by the simplicity of his presentation. "This is a selection of hot sauces from Earth," Jericho announced. "Each one represents a unique blend of heat and flavor." Grethok snorted. "Heat from Earth? A bold claim." Raltran chuckled from the sidelines. "We'll try not to be underwhelmed." The judges sampled the Inferno Ignite first. Calox tilted its crystalline head, emitting a faint hum, mildly piquant, pleasant. Grethok tried the dragon's breath and blinked all 6 of his eyes. Ishim, a tingle, surprising. Then came Molten Core. As Calox dipped a shard of crystal into the sauce, the room seemed to hold its breath. There was a faint hiss as the sauce contacted the crystal. "Unusual," Calox remarked, ingesting the shard. Seconds later, its crystalline body glowed with an intense orange light. "Oh, what is this?" Grethok took a cautious taste. His scales flushed red, and smoke curled from his nostrils. This is not mild," he croaked. Veska, always curious, pulsed as it sampled the tiniest drop. The orb began to vibrate erratically, emitting a high-pitched whine. "Fascinating. This Earthling's hot sauce is weaponized flavor." The audience erupted in astonishment. Raltran's sneer faltered, replaced by a gelatinous wobble of disbelief. Jericho couldn't suppress a grin. "That's just the appetizer." The aftermath of Jericho's appetizer presentation reverberated through the Palatinas. In the preparation chambers, alien chefs were in various states of confusion, disbelief, and most amusing to Jericho, panic. Several tried to keep their distance from his station, as though proximity to his hot sauces might spontaneously combust their own ingredients. Raltran, on the other hand, was far from cowed. His gelatinous form trembled as he loomed over Jericho's station. "This mockery cannot stand," he hissed, each word punctuated by a ripple in his translucent body. "You've disrupted the balance of this showcase with your chemical weaponry." Jericho didn't even look up from his cutting board, where he was dicing alien root vegetables with a knife that vibrated at frequencies just shy of visible light. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I didn't realize spices were against the rules." Raltran's form darkened, a shade that Jericho guessed was anger. "Spices are meant to enhance, to elevate, not to." He gestured toward a nearby pot, where the remnants of a failed dish fizzled ominously, likely due to a lingering vapor of molten core. "Melt things." "Sounds like you're just jealous my primitive spice is hotter than your entire repertoire," Jericho shot back. Raltran opened his mouth, well, the closest approximation of a mouth on his gelatinous face, but before he could retort, the holographic announcement system flared to life again. "Chefs, prepare for the second round. You will have 1 hour to create a dish that embodies the spirit of innovation while adhering to galactic health standards. Begin." Jericho glanced around the room. Alien chefs sprang into action, reaching for ingredients that floated in stasis fields or hummed with barely contained energy. The gaseous chef in the containment sphere was already assembling a dish that involved some kind of levitating broth, while a reptilian chef was carefully searing strips of luminous meat on a plasma grill. Jericho exhaled and cracked his knuckles. "All right, buddy," he muttered to himself. time to kick it up a notch. For this round, Jericho decided to lean into fusion cuisine literally. He grabbed a starchy root vegetable from the Galactic pantry, something that reminded him of a potato if potatoes had veins of glowing silver running through them. He paired it with an earth-style batter infused with a few drops of dragon's breath and began frying slices into thin, crispy chips. Next, he found a tub of gelatinous green substance labeled Spleck. He wasn't sure what it was, but it smelled faintly of basil and mint. He whipped it into a frothy dip, adding a few flakes of crystallized capsaicin for an extra kick. For the piece de resistance, Jericho grabbed a vial of shimmering, opalescent syrup he'd seen another chef use earlier. He drizzled it over the chips, creating a dish that sparkled under the kitchen's overhead lights. He tasted a small piece and grinned. It was sweet, spicy, and just a little weird perfect. While he worked, he noticed Raltran glancing his way, muttering to his assistant, a hovering spherical droid named Celix. Jericho squinted. The droid seemed to be analyzing something, its yellow eyes glowing as it scanned the room. "What are you up to?" Blobby Jericho muttered under his breath, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. The timer was ticking down. When the second round concluded, Jericho stepped forward with his dish, which he had dubbed Firestarter Fusion Galactic chips, and dipped. The other chefs presented their creations first. The gaseous chef had concocted a dish that changed state as you ate it, shifting from liquid to solid to vapor with each bite. A Tevlian chef had created a sphere of translucent gelatin that contained an entire miniature ecosystem of flavors, released only when the sphere was broken open. Raltran presented an elaborate platter of edible crystals that resonated musically when touched, each note corresponding to a different flavor. Then it was Jericho's turn. He placed his humble platter on the table and stepped back, arms crossed. Grethuk, the six-eyed reptilian judge, was the first to sample it. He picked up a chip, sniffed cautiously, and popped it into his mouth. His scales flushed an immediate deep red, and steam puffed from his nostrils. "It's crunchy," he croaked, "and fiery." But his eyes blinked rapidly, as though resetting themselves. "It grows on you." Kellogg's tilted its crystalline head. The balance of textures is surprisingly effective. The sweetness offsets the earthling's characteristic intensity. Veska, ever curious, spun in a rapid circle before sampling the dip. Its glow pulsed erratically for a moment before stabilizing. "This dish is unlike anything I have encountered. Simplicity executed with daring boldness. Remarkable." Raltran's gelatinous body wavered visibly. The judges conferred, and the holographic leaderboard shifted. Jericho's name climbed steadily upward, just barely overtaking Raltran's crystalline platter. The audience gasped. Raltran's voice bubbled with indignation. "This is absurd. A plate of fried roots and spice drizzle is not innovation, it's chaos masquerading as cuisine." Jericho smirked. "Guess the judges disagree." Before the argument could escalate, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. One of the chef's stations had caught fire literally. A pot of steaming liquid bubbled over, its contents reacting violently with the countertop beneath it. Sparks flew as the liquid ate through the alloy like acid. Raltran spun toward Jericho, his gelatinous form trembling with rage. "Your abomination of a sauce is to blame." "Hey, I haven't even opened Molten Core this round," Jericho shot back, holding his hands up defensively. "Don't pin this on me just because your fancy alien cookware can't handle Earth's heat." Maintenance drones buzzed into action, spraying foam over the fire as the alarms subsided. The judges looked visibly rattled, but Veska floated forward, its glow dimming slightly. The competition must continue. The Earthling's entry will remain under review, but all contestants are reminded to adhere strictly to Galactic safety protocols. Raltran simmered literally, his form bubbling faintly. "You may have scraped by this time, Earthling," he muttered, "but you will not win the final round." Jericho raised an eyebrow, his grin unfaltering. "We'll see about that." As the alarms faded and order returned to the Palatinas, the tension in the room grew thick enough to slice with one of the floating knives. Jericho could feel the weight of every alien chef's glare, but he wasn't about to back down. His steady climb up the leaderboard had turned heads, and Roltran's increasingly public fury only added to the spectacle. The holographic system flared again, and Vesca floated to the center of the room, its light brightening to command attention. "Chefs, the final round is upon us," it intoned. "This round will determine the victor of the Galactic Culinary Showcase and define the pinnacle of innovation. The challenge: craft a fusion dish utilizing the galaxy's most unpredictable ingredient, the Starfire pod." A collective murmur rippled through the room. Jericho leaned towards Cypher, the mud-skinned chef who had become his closest ally. "I'm guessing this isn't a space version of jalapenos." Cypher's cracked face emitted a faint chuckle. "Hardly. The Starfire pod is a living ingredient. Its seeds combust if exposed to improper combinations of moisture and heat. Few chefs dare to use it and fewer succeed." Roltran's gelatinous form oozed forward, his voice dripping with smug confidence. "A fitting challenge. Let's see if the Earthling can manage to prepare something edible without burning down the kitchen." Jericho shot back a grin. "Careful, Roltran. Wouldn't want you melting under the pressure." A pedestal rose from the center of the room, encased in a shimmering dome of energy. As the dome flickered away, it revealed the Starfire pod, an organic, football-sized pod covered in faintly glowing veins. Its surface pulsed rhythmically, almost as if it were alive. The chefs approached the pedestal one by one to receive their pods. Jericho took his, the warmth of the strange ingredient seeping through his gloves. Up close, the veins seemed to shift, glowing brighter in unpredictable patterns. He felt like he was holding a hand grenade disguised as a fruit. The holographic system flared again. "Chefs, you have 2 hours to prepare your dish. Begin." Jericho returned to his station and carefully placed the pod on the counter, eyeing it warily. He pulled out a plasma blade to slice it open, but Cypher called out from across the room. "Don't cut too deep, Earthling. The seeds are volatile." "Thanks for the heads up," Jericho muttered, adjusting his grip. He made a shallow incision, and the pod split open with a faint hiss, revealing its contents. Inside, dozens of glowing seeds nestled in a sticky, iridescent pulp. The seeds shimmered like tiny pearls, each radiating faint heat. He scooped one out gingerly and sniffed it. The aroma was unlike anything he'd ever encountered, a mix of roasted chestnuts, citrus, and something faintly metallic. Jericho decided to play to his strengths. He'd tamed the Starfire pod with an Earth-inspired dish that balanced its wild, volatile flavors with his own signature spice. He envisioned a layered creation, a galactic take on stuffed peppers. He hollowed out several nulox roots, their starchy interiors providing a stable base. Next, he blended a filling using crushed brelith meat, the pulp of the Starfire pod, and a touch of splexa for freshness. For the seeds, he had an idea: slow roasting them in a vacuum chamber to control their combustion while bringing out their nutty flavor. While the seeds roasted, he prepared a glaze by combining the Starfire pulp with a drizzle of his own Molten Core sauce. He tasted a drop and winced. "Yup, that's gonna wake some taste buds." Across the room, Roltran was in his element. His gelatinous form moved with fluid precision as he sculpted a towering dish of levitating Starfire seeds encased in crystallized sugar. The other chefs scrambled to keep pace, some muttering curses as their pods reacted unpredictably. One chef's station erupted in a small explosion as their seeds overheated, sending a plume of smoke into the air. Jericho glanced over, relieved it wasn't his this time. With 10 minutes left on the clock, Jericho carefully assembled his dish. He stuffed the roasted nulox roots with the filling, arranged the toasted seeds on top, and brushed everything with the fiery glaze. As a finishing touch, he sprinkled crystallized capsaicin over the dish, giving it a faint, glittering shimmer. When the timer sounded, the chefs stepped back from their stations, their dishes ready for judgment. The judges floated down to inspect the entries, starting with Roltran. The gelatinous chef presented his creation with a flourish. "I call this celestial symphony. The Starfire seeds are encased in a harmonic sugar crystal that enhances their natural flavors." The judges tasted carefully. Kalox emitted a low hum. "A fine execution. The sugar crystal balances the Starfire's intensity." Grethuk nodded, though his eyes didn't sparkle with the same enthusiasm. "Technically precise, though predictable." Raltran stiffened, his form darkening slightly. Next came Jericho. He stepped forward and placed his dish on the table. This is Earth meets the stars, a fusion of galactic and human flavors. The starfire seeds are slow roasted and paired with a spicy glaze inspired by Earth's culinary traditions. Grethok eyed the dish suspiciously, his tongue flicking nervously. Chilox reached for a piece first, its crystalline fingers delicately lifting one of the stuffed roots. The moment Chilox bit into it, its body glowed a brilliant orange, resonating like a tuning fork. This is extraordinary. Grethok hesitated, then took a bite. His 6 eyes widened as smoke curled from his nostrils. The heat. It burns, but the depth of flavor, he coughed. But his expression was one of admiration. Veska spun rapidly after tasting. This dish is bold. The Earthling has tamed the starfire pod's chaos, channeling its energy into a harmonious experience. The audience murmured with excitement as the judges moved on to the remaining dishes. Some earned praise, others critique, but none seemed to match the fervor sparked by Jericho's creation. When the final scores appeared on the holographic leaderboard, Jericho's name sat firmly at the top. Raltran stared at the board in disbelief, his gelatinous form trembling. "This is a travesty," he bellowed. "A plate of roasted roots and spice cannot defeat a masterpiece of galactic cuisine." Veska floated forward, its glow bright and steady. The Earthling has proven that simplicity, executed with innovation and daring, can surpass even the most elaborate designs. The Galactic Culinary Guild welcomes Earth to its pantheon of culinary excellence. The audience erupted into applause. Cypher gave Jericho a thumbs up, well, the closest approximation of one, given its cracked hands. Jericho grinned, holding up a bottle of Molten Core like a trophy. "Looks like Earth's primitive spice just kicked things up a notch." Raltran slithered off in silence, his reputation in tatters. As the Palatinus prepared to dock, Veska approached Jericho. "Earth's flavors have left an indelible mark on this competition. What will you do next?" Jericho chuckled, tucking his case of sauces under his arm. "Oh, I've got plans. Let's just say the galaxy hasn't seen the last of Molten Core." Veska pulsed with amusement. The galaxy may never be ready, but it will learn. Jericho walked off the ship, ready to bring Earth's spice to the stars.